I'm Mike Coyle, and you're watching Inside Exploration. Today I'm here with a special guest, Gino Chitaroni. Gino is a lifetime resident of the Temiskaming area, as his family owned and operated silver mines in the Cobalt Mining Camp during the 1960s. Today we're going to be discussing the state of mining in Northern Ontario, as Gino is also the president of the Northern Prospectors Association, and most recently, he's taken on the role as president of RJK Exploration, a company searching for the source of the Nipissing diamond. Gino, thanks for joining me today.
Yeah, thank you, Mike.
So, Gino, why don't you give our viewers a little bit of insight into your background and what you do within the Cobalt Mining Camp?
Yeah. Well, my background is pretty much in the education at the Haileybury School of Mines. Started in the industry about 1982. Graduated in '85 from Haileybury, and then went on to Lake Superior State University in 1987. Graduated there, and then I went on and worked in some of the area silver mines, namely Agnico. There's a couple operations I worked underground on, and then during those same years in the 80s, Teck-Corona and Hemlo, and then eventually I went on to form my own company called Blackstone Development. It came after I did some work with a group called EGO Resources Ltd-Cobatec, which formed the Electra refinery as you see it today. I was there in the early 90s, and then I formed my own company coming out of Blackstone called Polymet Labs, and I ran that from around 2000 to 2019 when I sold the lab and business. And in the interim, I've been involved with many junior companies, a lot of them at the startup stage, very much at the grassroots end of things. And then it really took off around 2015, 2016 with the cobalt boom, and I did deals and worked with groups as eclectic as Brixton Metals to First Cobalt. At that time, I was with Cobalt One, which was the precursor company, one of the companies that was merged with First Cobalt. I was with Cobalt Power, and I did work with battery mineral resources, and then eventually did some work with Canada Silver Cobalt Works, among others.
So why don't you tell us a little bit about how you became involved with the Northern Prospectors Association and what led you to become the president?
Well, I've been a long-time prospector since 1987, and I became more involved with politics and whatnot beginning in right after university and in the late 80s. And I ended up joining the Northern Prospectors Association around the late 80s, 89, 80, 88, that time. And I stayed on mainly as a director, and then eventually around 2014, after 17 years as a Town of Cobalt counselor, I had a little more time freed up. I decided to they've asked me to take on the presidency, and I've been doing that ever since, around 2015, 2016. And since that time, as well as wearing the hat of a board member of the Ontario Prospectors Association over the last 5 or 6 years. So I'm quite involved with the association, have been for some time.
So can you give us some insight as to what you do, not necessarily you, but the Northern Prospectors Association in general?
Well, the NPA, or Northern Prospector Association for short, is basically a lobbyist organization that works on behalf of the small prospector out there, and works with junior companies, and has a lot of work that it does with the provincial government. We do a lot of lobbying efforts to work on the Mining Act and different changes in prospecting regulations. We see ourselves also as an educator. We try to educate the general public, First Nations. We put on prospectors courses. We try to educate about many things that are good for the industry as a whole, in a situation where sometimes it's not that friendly toward exploration mining. So we see ourselves very valuable with respect to the community at large. And as an organization, we also are charitable, which is unusual for a prospecting organization. So we do support charitable organizations in concert to what we do. One of the things we really do, and it's kind of missing because of COVID, is putting together regional symposiums. And this is a big thing where we bring government and private sector together and the general public to talk about the merits of the industry and educate those groups. A lot of them are municipalities and First Nations, actually. But at the same time, it's a good way for prospectors to promote their projects.
So on that note, will you be attending the event in Timmins this week?
Yeah, I'm heading up tomorrow. It's nice to be able to go to the Northern Mining Show. I've been up there since before COVID. One thing about the Timmins Mine Show, which I find very valuable for the industry, is that it calls into the whole spectrum of mining, from explorationists to mining suppliers to contractors, the whole spectrum, which I sometimes you don't get enough of. And although a lot of the talks that are put on up there are exploration talks, it's a must-see show for most explorationists.
So why don't we talk about the election? I think this is an important thing that's just happened with the Conservative government getting a majority. And I wanted to get your take on how you feel that is going to play into mining in Northern Ontario.
Well, my personal view is this. I believe that, let me put it this way. For about 20 years under inconsistent policies set upon us actually by the provincial government, mainly under the past Liberal regime, that when the PCs came in 2018, and unfortunately got a lot of their agenda got derailed because of COVID. Having another majority by a business-friendly party, it bodes very advantageously for the exploration mining sector. Business right across the board for Northern Ontario. That's the main reason. But most importantly, I find that those particular MPPs that I've been in contact with, namely Fideli out of North Bay and Rickford, the minister out of Kenora area, has been very mining and exploration friendly. And this is a breath of fresh air for the entire industry. And of course, the results came about where the majority even got larger. And I think that this bodes well for the possibility of introducing new types of legislation and ideas and cutting red tape, which is a hallmark of this government. I know they wanted to do that the last mandate, but they really couldn't due to extenuating circumstances. But one of the things that was a bit of a sea change in Northern Ontario is the unseating of Gilles Bisson, longtime MPP in Timmins, with George Pirie, the mayor of Timmins and a well-known mining executive. I think this is going to be a sea change of a major proportions in the Timmins area. I think we're going to feel it throughout northeastern Ontario. I know he's a big proponent of mining and exploration projects, and with projects in that area, especially when you look at the big nickel project, Canada Nickel. I think that this is going to spawn a whole bunch of new industry and a lot of acceptance, which is a big thing that we found it very difficult, because the last 15, 20 years, we felt that we're, as an association at the NPA level, and of course a lot of mining companies, that you spend a lot of time putting out fires everywhere because of regulations and the outright hostility by some of the and let's put it this way, greenies out there. And yet we've been willing to sit down and talk with all parties at all times, be it First Nations over to general public, right over to environmental interests.
It kills me because you can't have a green economy without mining. But hey, that's a whole other conversation. So listen, why don't you give us an update in the Cobalt Mining Camp? I know you're very active here. I know you're working with RJK Exploration. Let's not talk about RJK yet. I want to save that for the end because maybe we'll go a little more in depth with that. But start off with what's happening with Electra battery metals. This is a pretty exciting development for this area. I mean, that's a lot of jobs. You've got the opportunity of creating a battery park in Northern Ontario. And by all means, Northern Ontario is connected as a whole between Timmins and Sudbury and even as far into Quebec. Do you have any insight into Electra battery metals?
Well, I was previously involved with the precursor company, First Cobalt, vis-a-vis there was 3 companies that came together under the umbrella of First Cobalt. The Australian group that I was with was called Cobalt One. I was very much involved in a lot of their land acquisitions as an exploration company, but I was also involved with the former Cobatec plant, which I've been involved in many stages over the years. I was involved in it with Can Mine when they were there, and of course some of their more recent entries at United Commodity was very much instrumental there. So I actually helped them quite a bit at the very grassroots stage of this, and then it just morphed on its own, and they went in their own direction. At first, First Cobalt, when they started looking at this, it's a lot of learning curves for them because some of their people weren't involved in the cobalt sector before or in the battery sector. So what they had was what they had to work with, which was a site that was environmentally friendly. It was permitted, had tremendous infrastructure, and then they had to come up with a concept. And lo and behold, the green economy has really taken off over the last 5-10 years here, especially the last 5. You could feel it coming, but you didn't really see it going until the last 5 years, and it's taken them a little while to get the funding in place, which was serious funding, which was a major problem for past operators of the facility. They were chronically underfinanced, and then they had a problem in securing supply. And what battery has done here, Electra battery has done here, is secured supply. They partnered up with a major supplier that's worldwide in its tentacles with respect to cobalt, with Glencore, and also they tapped into provincial and federal money to get that kind of kudos for that type of financing. Gives them credibility on a different level, which wasn't there before. So going forward, the whole plant itself is now gone to a point where, they're going to make cobalt products, and then they're leaning toward some cobalt battery and battery recyclables, which is kind of a recent concept that they added in the last year. But this idea of a battery materials park, industrial park, I think that screams out to me as a big wow factor in the whole industry. This changes the dynamics of the entire facility. I see it. I can envision it in 15, 20 years as being a big, huge monster in a good way as a facility. I don't want to take too many leaps and bounds, but you look at the size of some of the refineries that are have been in production in Northern Ontario, whether it be the Glencore, the Valley plants down in Sudbury, or way Kid Creek used to be in Timmins, or Noranda's facilities in Noranda, Quebec. I could see it on that order. We're talking it could be into the hundreds and near thousands of jobs as a possibility, not maybe direct to the facility, but indirect to go with this. So it's going to be a profound change on the area, provided that they can pull off a quality product, and they are aligned with those suppliers and can survive the cycles and the business cycles, which I think the nice thing about this whole idea is that they're not relying just on cobalt metal. They're now looking at nickel sulfate. I'm sure I've heard rumors about lithium. and other green metals that are involved. So some of the potential partners that they have will give them the opportunity to go and spin in a different direction, as a park should, an industrial park like a lot of them we see in throughout any major municipality, you know. Except this one's going to be based on the green economy and the battery business. But they also have one other thing going for it, which is they're purporting to have they're going to have an environmental friendly, low carbon footprint, which I think speaks volumes with respect to those people that this helps in social license, and that allows them to be able to be accepted by First Nations, the general public at large, those who are neighbors to the facility, and of course municipalities at large in the region. But you know, from the positive economic impacts, being a former longtime town councillor in Cobalt and involved in many political situations, whether it be the Temiskaming Municipal Association and whatnot, I can't think of a better project for this area, provided that they get the funding that they need and they make a good product and that they're accepted out there in the marketplace. This is a game changer for Northeastern Ontario.
Originally, I wasn't really, well, let's just say I was skeptical of them coming in as a cobalt refinery, as I know the deposits of cobalt within the Cobalt area are sparse at best. But I do like what they've done since Glencore's got involved. I think Trent Mill's on the right track. I guess the only skepticism that I would have left is where are they going to get a feed of battery supply? But I think there's sources for black mass that are attainable. So I'm really interested to see this project go through. You know, it means nothing but great things for the community, as you says, lots of job creation there, right?
A quick comment to that, Mike, is this: all past performing opportunities at that particular location, whether it goes back to Cobatec days to the latest failure, which was United Commodity, is that they didn't have feedstock, and then they were chronically underfinanced. The problem with earlier opportunities was looking at the concept of cobalt arsenide feedstock, chiefly coming from the Cobalt camp itself. I know CanMine had a project looking at Werner Lake as an example over in Manitoba, Ontario border, and they seem to have the right idea. But again, the issue became dealing with cobalt arsenides, and now this facility is not doing that. And so the arsenic component is not a major part of this project. And at this point in time right now, local suppliers of cobalt is something that this company does not need. Yep. And that makes me extremely happy as a resident, that I believe that this is going to have some real sustainable capabilities going forward. And if they build their markets like I think they are, and they insulate themselves from the business cycle spectrum, you know, if you go through ups and downs, and if they can continue and get this thing built up in time before, let's say, the next financial downturn, that would help them out. I hope that they don't have to suffer that, because in past operations we've seen where cobalt prices crashed on it, and it just took the wind out of the sails of almost every operator on the area. Every major cobalt spike that we've seen and experienced in the Cobalt area was brief, and then it fell, all within a matter of 8 to 12 months to as no more than, say, 2 years. That's not nearly enough to sustain an operation with any assurity, that's for sure.
No, and I mean, I got to be honest, Trent Mell's making a believer out of me. I've been down to the site a few times, poking around, snooping around, and I like what I'm seeing for progress. It looks like a great project. I'm excited for what it means for the North. Let's talk about Kuya Silver. They've been pretty active in this area, quietly, but pretty active. Do you have any insight as to what they've been up to?
You know, with Kuya Silver, well, what's interesting with Kuya Silver is that they're the most recent group to come into the Cobalt camp. They basically optioned or bought their way in through deals with First Cobalt, because once First Cobalt was making it clear that they're moving away from exploration and looking at cobalt arsenide deposits, that as they were morphing to become a refinery, they needed to change their business model, and that's what's happened here. So they decided to peel off their silver cobalt land assets, and they cut a deal with a company, this Peruvian company called Kuya Silver. Now, Kuya Silver, their initial work started about a year and a half ago. They had to perform a certain amount of work to acquire their properties, and they've done some of that work that was necessary to finish these deals with First Cobalt. Their primary work area of interest to start with was in the Kerr Lake Arch area, and then of course they had some other assets nearby at New Lake Creek and in the Schumann Lake Arch. The interesting thing about Schumann Lake and Kerr Lake, Schumann Lake and New Lake areas are very underexplored areas. So they're onto something there, and I hope that they can sustain that work there. But at the same time, Kerr Lake area was a heavily mined area, producing well over 100 million ounces of silver in its time. But yeah, one would have to understand that these silver properties, the properties in the main cobalt camp are not really cobalt properties at all, and that was probably one of the problems with the conceptual discussions of exploration in the cobalt camp by most junior companies that came in here for cobalt, when silver is really the story here, and cobalt's a byproduct. So I believe Kuya Silver understands this, and most junior companies that are exploring here have that understanding now. But you couldn't really push that narrative back around 2015 through 2016, 17. You couldn't get traction from the market. So anyway, these particular projects are not right in the town of Cobalt. They're about 5 to 10 kilometers south and southeast of the town. And then they have really pushed some of their work down in what we call the Silver Center mini camp. Silver Center is a small exploration mini camp that's part of the greater Cobalt Mining Camp. So it's an area onto itself, kind of like Goganda or the Langus Mine area, Elk Lake. In this case here, it's located about 30 kilometers south of the town of Cobalt, and it had some prolific. It had a major prolific producer back in the 30s and 40s, and that was the Keeley Frontier, which was acquired by First Cobalt, and then with the subsequent deal with Kuya Silver, they took them over and they started exploring all the First Cobalt assets in that area. Now, the thing that they're concentrating on, to my knowledge, that comes out at me is the area south of the Keeley Frontier, near Oxbow Lake, and that seems to be some of their new efforts, because that area is practically virgin, and it has a lot of great structure, a fault structure in there that has not been looked at pretty much whatsoever, and especially most exploration in the Silver Center area has not seen any modern exploration for decades. So I think that we'll see what happens with the results, but they haven't come up with any results other than the fact that they submitted a 43-101 report back in September, and I haven't heard anything as to what they're planning to do this coming year.
All right, so another company that you might be pretty familiar with, as you just sold them Polymet Labs, would be Canada Silver Cobalt Works. Sorry, I get that mixed up. They've changed their name a few times over the last years.
Yeah.
So talk to us a bit about them.
Yeah, well, Canada Silver Cobalt Works is centered in the Goganda camp. They got a very large land position up there. They've been at it for a number of years here now. What's interesting about it is that they are the first group to record a modern resource as to modern and compliant standards, being a 43-101 reporting regimen. And so they come up with a maiden resource at East Robinson Zone at 7.5 million ounces over on 32, almost 33,000 metric tons in all categories. And that's and it's all high grade intercepts. And this is a brand new zone up there. I've often compared when I talk to a lot of explorationists out there about the Cobalt Camp, think of it like a tree. You have your branches and you have your tree trunk, the stem. And a lot of companies end up hitting a lot of these little branches. They can be very high grade, but there's really no tonnage. You can't make a mine out of it. So what I believe have gotten up there is the stem, and that promotes, when you get a stem like that in the Cobalt area, those sizable deposits are usually in the 25 to 50 million ounce range. Mm-hmm. So it looks like they're well on their way, because they've discovered several other intercepts and new zones that are close to the Castle Mine, because that's where this is located. Of course, the Castle Mine was operated by Agnico back in the 70s and 80s. Mm-hmm. And but anyway, the company itself has done some extensive work up there in the last year and a half. I haven't heard whether they haven't jigged up a new resource or not, but we're waiting for results to come out. I know that a lot of the companies have, because of COVID issues and whatnot, have had difficulty in getting their assay results in time. And it's been a problem for the entire industry. But they continue to get high-grade silver results up there. And they do get significant cobalt intercepts to go with them. And have had some gold indications as well, which is kind of unique to the Goganda area, because it's pretty close to the Larder Lake Break and region off the different gold belts of northeastern, northwestern Ontario, northeastern, southwestern Quebec area. So why not, right? So they'll make. I know one thing: a lot of the junior companies today, they assay all their core, which back in the day, very few companies would assay any more than, let's say, the element that they're chasing. That was it. So a lot of stuff ended up being missed, and they're not doing them. All these junior companies are doing a fantastic job of assaying and looking at all their core, which is a big thing, I would say. The other thing is that they moved all their facilities from Goganda down to Cobalt behind the what we call the old highway bookshop area. So they've taken that to task, and they centralized everything there. And of course they have a subsidiary, which was my old facility at Polymet, and they morphed that to handle at some point. They'll be able to handle their own silver bullion and do some of their own R&D, and of course any work with respect to cobalt extraction. So they're pretty busy. And then lately, in the last year, they morphed themselves to look at nickel properties in throughout different parts of Ontario, but with a target in Quebec that they're really pushing right now. So they diversified, and not sure what they're going to do with those nickel assets down the line. And then they've also got a gold property near Kirkland Lake, which which hasn't seen much work, and it's in the right area, and it's pretty close to Larder Lake Break, so why not? So that's as much as I know about Canada Silver Cobalt Works, other than the fact that Frank Bassa and his team has been in the works in the Cobalt Camp for many years in different modes and different reincarnations. So he's basically a local guy when you really think about it.
Yeah. All right, let's talk about Agnico. Agnico has held property in the Cobalt Mining Camp ever since I was a young fella running around behind the fences back there. So, but I mean, these guys just did a merger with KL Gold. They're on to bigger and better things. Is Agnico keeping their footprint in the Cobalt Mining Camp, or what do you think?
Well, Agnico is an interesting case. I worked for them in the 80s, at first as a student, and worked at several operations, and then as a miner. So they were the big player here up until when they shut their doors down. Basically, 1991 was the last operation, and then they shuttered everything permanently around 2001. And in some ways, they got kind of caught with the changes in the Mining Act, and they had an awful lot of legacy issues with respect to rehabilitation. And it's taken them basically 30 years on ongoing rehabilitation to bring the property to where it is today. And what I can say is that the property is in way better shape. They have a handle on what's there and what's not there. There is very little repercussions for incoming companies if they were to take over assets. So they come a long ways in that respect. But Agnico's package, where it was back in 1980, 88, 89, when it was at its zenith, is about maybe 40% of what it is today. Because a lot of these packages, they had a large package, Gogana, which CCW now has. They no longer have, or what they had over at the Langus mine, which Brixton Metals has right now. And so that's no longer there. And then a good part of Silver Center, what they were involved with, they have some legacy claims down there, but that's about all. The thing with that company, which complicated things in the last year, was this merger with KL Gold. So that made it very difficult on the corporate side to seriously discuss things with them. And we understand that. And sometimes you just got to sit back and let them do their thing, But they're active on the rehabilitation side. They're very active in the community. They're a heck of a lot more active and more steeped in their pockets and what they gave back to the Cobalt area, which they did a tremendous gift here not too long ago, and they continue to be very cognizant of their beginnings. That company started here, and they believe in that history, and they'll tell you that firsthand. The company itself, from everybody I've talked to, or especially the one, because their operations were mainly centered in Quebec the last 30 years, and they get high marks, and because of their work in the Cobalt area is one thing, but really the one to watch is how they're going to handle their assets in the Kirkland Lake area and up in the Porcupine Dester fault areas. They control a massive package of property, and in fact, a lot of the stuff that was Queenston mining at one time, very little of it's been explored. And they said so when we had them over for some NPA geological talks. So they got lots to work with, and one of their top projects is the project situated near the little village of Dobie, and so that's going to really take off there in the Lair Lake, Virginia town area. That's going to be a huge operation, both underground and surface. There'll likely be small open pit there, I'm not sure, but that was discussed. What's interesting about Agnico, they were never a surface miner until they took over KL Gold. Mm-hmm. And KL Gold was a surface miner until they took over Detour. So, right. It's one gobbling up another. But one thing about Agnico is that they got a good corporate mindset. They understand social license. They're an excellent company to work for, and I think whatever they can contribute in the Kirkland Lake area is going to be great for Kirkland Lake and all of northeastern Ontario. They're on par with anything that's going to happen in the area. They're here for the long term. And I suspect that you're probably going to look at 200 to 300 full-time jobs up in that area. And of course, I think the single biggest problem that we're going to find out in their industry, and we spoke about this, you and me, not that long ago, is that where are they going to get the workers? It's not easy to find qualified people in our industry. And that's a problem facing the entire mining sector, both exploration as well as mining. So Agnico, well, we'll see what happens with their assets in the Cobalt area. I'm not sure what they have in mind, but you have to understand these are not gold-based metal assets down here. They're silver cobalt, and it's really not part of their business plan to be involved in that. So I'm not 100% sure where they're going with the camp here.
Well, you touched base on another company that I forgot to bring up before Agnico, and that's Brixton. This one caught me off guard. They found silver north of New Liskeard, which, I've always looked at north of New Liskeard as a giant mud flat. It's flat as flat can be and as much clay as you can come by.
Well, I brought Brixton in here with a group out of Toronto called Canagco, and they cut their way into the Cobalt camp with that first deal, and they took over the Langus mine, and they needed to raise money, and they did so through Sprott, if I recall. Mm-hmm. And they didn't know a darn thing about the Cobalt camp. I mean, it's nothing. And so they hired local guys, and one of the main guys up there is Martin Etier, done a tremendous job up there, and worked with guys like myself because I helped him quite a bit at the site. One of the first things they did after doing initial work was to acquire the balance of the assets up there from Agnico, which was the Pena number 7 shaft. And that tightened up their ass. So they got a clean site up there. I mean, clean from the standpoint of land tenure. They got a large land base there for a standalone silver operation, but also they're pretty okay with respect to environmental matters because the site is actually pretty good shape. So, and then all of a sudden they start looking, and unlike some of the discussions I had with them, they assayed all the drill core, which was a big benefit, and you could see that they're one of the first ones to do that. And they actually had some gold kicks with some of their drill intercepts, and a lot of it's because they typically, most silver cobalt operators would stop no sooner to get into the volcanics past end conform between the Nippus and diabase and the conglomerates interface with the volcanics. They usually stop your hole within 25, 30 meters, and they just kept it going. So they'd go 50 meters or almost 100 meters past that contact, and lo and behold, well, wouldn't be something that's surprising, but because people didn't do that in past exploration. So they learned, they put together a pretty good exploration team. They did a lot of geomodeling, and they come up with some concepts where they chased down some of the initial stuff that Agnico was looking at, initial discoveries in 85, 86, and they're starting to expand them. And in fact, they went back right to the number 3 shaft and drilled the heck right out of that area, because no one's done any work on that. Even Agnico didn't do any work in that area. So one of the things that they're finding out is that some of the old timers mentioned to me, and I'll give a shout out to Red Lafoy, who's, I'm not sure if he's still alive today, but here he is in his late 90s, and one of the past mine managers up there, and he wanted to sink the shaft another level deep to get lower into the volcanics, because nearly every stope that was there that was mined out had ore in the floor. So these are things that bode well for that package up there, because they're getting silver. They may not get the high grade silver like CCW, but they're doing fairly well nonetheless. So it'd be interesting to see if they have a resource that they're going to calculate by year end or in the next 12 months. Hard to say, but I think they've done quite well, and yet that's not the only property they have. They have one in behind the arena in Cobalt, which is called the Hudson Bay, and again, they pioneered something that some of the other junior companies never did in the Cobalt area. They actually drilled through open cuts and open stopes and did that successfully. And they found parallel zones and intercepts and recovered them, which is quite difficult in diamond drilling. And they're successful, and kudos to them. Their concept would be not much different in some respects to what First Cobalt was initially looking at, as an example, because they're looking at possible open pitting, and so there's that discussion Hudson Bay as well. Not so much at the Langus operation that they have in north and east of New Liskeard, but it's just the same. You never know where they're going to go with it, because there's an awful lot of silver cobalt veins that are there and that have been underexplored. And they got to actually, believe it or not, they have areas in that package that have almost seen very little exploration, if any, if at all. And so they just, last I heard, they did a very sizable deep IP program. So we'll be interested to see what those results will yield.
Yeah, Brixton's one I'm going to be keeping an eye on. I've liked their story ever since they hit north of New Liskeard. So actually, I got onto them when they were doing a little bit of diamond exploration. So segue, diamond exploration. Gino, you are the president of RJK Explorations. You found yourself in this new role partially because you've been very active in the Cobalt Mining Camp. My understanding is that you really helped the company formulate the land package that they have today. And today it's one of the largest land packages that the Cobalt Mining Camp's ever seen. So talk to us about the diamond exploration and where you guys are at with RJK.
Well, I have been with RJK for the last 2.5, 3 years now, mainly as an advisor. And then the company saw it fit that would be complementary to the team that I come on as president. I bring an awful lot to the team here with respect to my knowledge of the main cobalt camp and its geology, its history, and of course the people. And that's a big job requirement when you're looking at going forward in some of these projects. Sometimes it's a major missing element for a lot of junior companies. But in our case here, as we're moving along here, we're looking at diamond exploration is not an easy business, simply because it's difficult to quantify as opposed to base or precious metals. So we need to have a very large position if we're going to attract large investment or large investors. And we're doing just that, increasing the land position and tightening up the situations within that land position. You don't like to have too many donuts because that really hurts you going forward. Now, what we've been very interestingly successful is by using different techniques in the exploration industry to come up with these newer kimberlites that we're finding south and east of the town of Cobalt along the Cross Lake Fault. That's pretty much where our focus is right now, but also we're looking at parallel systems. What I like about it is that we certainly have a large tonnage of kimberlite that has been quantified to a 43-101 standard yet. What we believe is that some of those areas have great chemistry and looks like they'll come from very deep portions of the Earth's crust, which is what yields large diamonds. This is all about finding big macro diamonds to be economic. So we're talking depths of likely about 400 to 700 kilometers. That's a heck of a long ways. So the conduit system appears to be from the Cross Lake Fault system. But at the same time, there's an awful lot of academia that has to go into this at some point in the future to ascertain the actual age of these, because most of the typical kimberlites that have been previously discovered over the last 50, 60, 70 years have been in the 150 million to 200 million year range. And they've been well glaciated. And so a lot of the tops of these kimberlite pipes, as it were, have been eroded away, whereas ours are pretty much intact and pancaked out. So it's going to be quite a job to find the sources of some of these, but we have enough pancaked area that that needs to be properly sampled. So we're looking at a larger sampling program, or looking at several different techniques, and that's where the company's basically going right now, is trying to ascertain the right way to do this. And we have we've been in contact with some of the best specialists in the diamond business in Canada and throughout the world, especially with Clipper type diamonds, Clipper being deep-seated diamond sources. And so we're waiting for some of the consultants' reports to come in, so we know where we're going to go with the next work that we're going to do. I know one thing for sure: we're going to be doing some more drilling, and we're going to expand our portfolio, and we're going to get to a point where we get into a critical mass situation where we cannot be ignored. And what's kind of interesting for us, and it's kind of a lucky thing on our part, but we see, well, diamond prices have been rising anyway, but COVID has led to certain things occurred in the world, and eventually it led to this debacle that's happened between Russia and Ukraine. And because of that invasion, the world has censured the Russian government and operators and businesses. And as a caveat, or as an adjunct to that, sorry, better word, is the fact that Alrosa which is the big Russian diamond player, which is a worldwide diamond player, has been censored. So they're under sanctions right now, which is going to change the price regime for cut diamonds. We expect that there's going to be anywhere from 20 to 30% shortage in cut diamonds going forward. I don't know when or how long this is going to be in this situation, but it's probably, initially I thought it might be short term, but based on that invasion over in Ukraine, it seems to be, well, we're looking at, could be years, who knows. And anyway, with respect to Arosa not putting new diamonds on the scene, which by the way is right up there, De Beers is one of the largest mining companies of diamonds in the world, really helps out junior companies like ourselves. So we would likely see that in an economy and a world that's becoming more and more dangerous, whether it's the Chinese looking at Taiwan or potential of a market crash, or COVID's still around, that people get very antsy about their investment. So we believe that RJK is well located in a very stable area of Ontario. We have tremendous infrastructure, second to none, which makes our possibility of finding diamonds greater, because we'll have that more investment. But more importantly, when you do have that investment and you do find economic grades of diamonds in these kimberlitic bodies, that eventually they can be easily brought on stream because of the cost regimen here is so low. There's nobody in the northern latitudes of Canada could remotely come close to our cost regime here. So, and the fact that our kimberlites are practically right at surface with very little overburden is very positive for the outlook for us going forward as a company. So we'll see how that translates and where we go. We have to. It's a difficult scene to work in, but we've been quiet about it, and there's reasons to be quiet in our industry.
All right, perfect. But you also brought on SRK Consulting, who features Casey Hetman, who is a very well-known and very well-respected diamond explorer, or resource modeling geologist for that matter. Absolutely. Did you have a chance to meet with Casey?
Oh yeah, I met him when he was up here about almost a month and a half ago. A guy like that and his team are in huge demand all over the world, you know. So it's sometimes you have to sit in line with experts like that, because there are not that many out there when you really think about it. So now we're just waiting. He's one of the diamond experts, of course, that we're talking to, and we're waiting for him to get back to us as to where we're going, where our next steps would be, and what direction we're going to want to go into. So we are hoping to get some of that before the PDAC coming up here next week, but that's okay. You know, better to do this right than not right at all.
I agree 100%. And I'm very encouraged by having Casey on board. I look forward to what he has to say. On that note, are you guys heading to PDAC?
Yeah, I'll be there. I'm there for 3 days. Also, I'll be spending an interesting thing. Like RJK doesn't have a booth there, but I'll be floating around, of course. Sometimes it's a better way to do it, because you get hunkered down in a booth and you really can't meet investors very well, especially during the day. It can be fairly wasteful and very exhausting, actually. Yeah. But I'm also there. We're one of the few groups in Northern Prospectors that actually has a booth there compared to any other group in Canada. So we encourage people to come over and talk to us at the NPA booth, because we also promote prospectors' property. So any prospector that's within our catchment area, which is Kirkland Lake, Temiskaming, up to Timmins and toward Sudbury, and over in Quebec too, can promote their properties with us and work the booth, and it's a good place to meet. So I'll be there off and on, and you know, it's been an awful long time since being a PDAC. I can't wait to get reacquainted with a lot of old buddies and friends and new investors and the like. So, you know, quite pleased to be able to say I'm going finally.
Well, Gino, I think this has been a very pleasant conversation. I think this is a good place to cut it off. So we'll end it here today. Again, our guest was Gino Chitaroni, mining consultant and president of the Northern Prospectors Association and president of RJK Exploration. If you're looking to reach Gino, contact us and we'll be sure to connect you with him. Thanks for joining us, Gino.
Many thanks, Mike, once again.